They spent my entire emergency fund on a cruise, while I was lying in bed, stitched up, and unable to even walk. The worst part? They smiled when they told me, "If you think this is unbelievable, wait till you hear what happened next, because..." What I did later made the whole family gasp in silence. Before I tell you, make sure you're following so you don't miss the ending that had everyone's jaw on the floor. It all started 2 weeks after my surgery. I was still in pain, barely able to get out of bed without help, when my cousin Madison showed up at my apartment with her phone in hand, grinning ear to ear. "Scarlett, guess what? We just came back from the most amazing Caribbean cruise," she said, tossing her long hair back like she was in a commercial. At first, I was confused. I knew she'd been struggling with money for months, her credit cards were maxed out, and she was always borrowing cash from people. But then, she casually mentioned, "Oh, and by the way, thanks for covering part of the trip. That emergency fund you told Aunt Cheryl about? Yeah, we used it. You weren't using it anyway." My heart froze. "You what?" I could barely breathe. She shrugged. "You were just lying here. We thought it'd be better to put that money to some good use." As if that wasn't enough, later that evening, I found out it wasn't just Madison. My own aunt had gone behind my back, withdrawn the money from my joint family emergency account, and booked the cruise for herself, Madison, and 2 other relatives, while I was lying in bed, counting pills to make sure I wouldn't run out before my next checkup. They were sipping cocktails on a sunny deck, sending each other selfies in matching straw hats. I didn't say a word to them after that. Not because I was weak, but because I already knew exactly how I was going to make them regret it, and they would never see it coming. For the next few days, I stayed silent. They thought my silence meant I was hurt and powerless, but in reality, I was plotting. I had been saving that emergency fund for nearly 3 years, not just for medical needs, but for something much bigger. Nobody in the family knew I'd been working late nights as a freelance web developer, building an online store on the side. They all thought I was just a struggling receptionist who barely made enough to survive. That was exactly how I wanted them to think. While they were flaunting cruise photos on Facebook, I was transferring the remainder of my savings into a separate account they couldn't touch. Every time I saw their posts, fancy dinners, sunset views, I felt a sharp twist in my chest, but I turned that pain into fuel. Then, a week later, Aunt Cheryl decided to rub it in even more. She came over, pretending to check on me, but really just to brag. She sat at my kitchen table, sipping the coffee I made her, and said, "Scarlett, you should have seen the buffet. Lobster, steak, desserts you can't even pronounce. You wouldn't have enjoyed it in your condition, so it's a good thing we went without you." Her smirk burned into me. I wanted to scream, but I kept my face calm and replied, "You're right, Aunt Cheryl. I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it, but I'm glad you did." She didn't know that 2 months earlier, I had already bought something that could change my life completely, something I hadn't told a single soul about. It wasn't a car, or jewelry, or a designer bag. No, this was much bigger. By the time they found out what it was, the tables would turn so hard they wouldn't even recognize me. And the place where it would all be revealed? A family gathering that Aunt Cheryl herself had planned. The invitation came exactly 1 week later, an elaborate, gold-trimmed card in the mail from Aunt Cheryl, announcing a family appreciation dinner at a fancy downtown restaurant. I could practically hear her voice in the wording, "Join us for a night of laughter, gratitude, and family bonding." I knew it wasn't about appreciation. It was about showing off. She had probably booked the most expensive venue just to brag about how well she was doing after that cruise. When I called to RSVP, her tone dripped with fake sweetness. "Oh, Scarlett, I wasn't sure you'd feel up to it after, the surgery. But it would be so nice for you to be there. We all missed you on the cruise." Translation: We had the time of our lives without you, and now we want to rub it in some more. For the next week, I prepared, not for revenge in the traditional sense, but for a reveal so powerful it would flip the family's hierarchy overnight. They thought I was still scraping by, struggling with medical bills. What they didn't know was that in the past 6 months, my little side project had exploded into a full-scale e-commerce brand. My store was making more in a week than Aunt Cheryl made in a month. And 2 months before the surgery, I had made my boldest move yet. I'd quietly purchased a historic downtown building that had been in foreclosure for years. That building wasn't just any property. It was the same one Aunt Cheryl had been trying to buy for years to turn into her dream boutique, but couldn't afford. And now, the deed had my name on it. The night of the dinner, I showed up in a simple navy dress, nothing flashy, just elegant enough to get noticed. The kind of outfit that makes people wonder if you've been doing better than you let on. As soon as I walked in, every head turned. I could see Madison whispering to another cousin, probably commenting on how surprisingly put together. I looked. Aunt Cheryl greeted me with an over-the-top hug, strong enough to show off her new diamond bracelet. "Scarlett, darling. So glad you could make it. Oh, and you'll love the slideshow, so many cruise photos. We thought you'd like to live it through us." I smiled politely. "I'm sure I will." Dinner started with laughter, wine, and endless cruise stories. They passed around photos, bragged about excursions, and even joked about how Scarlett's money went to a better cause. I could feel every eye occasionally flick toward me, expecting me to be embarrassed. But I wasn't. I was waiting for dessert, because that's when the night would turn. Halfway through, Aunt Cheryl stood up for her little speech, thanking everyone for coming. "Family is everything," she said, her voice thick with pride. "We've been through ups and downs, but we always support each other, and when one of us is down, the rest of us lift them up." I almost laughed at the irony. When she finished, I clinked my glass gently and said, "Actually, Aunt Cheryl, I have something I'd like to share too. Something I've been keeping quiet until tonight." The room went still. I could feel the shift, the mix of curiosity and discomfort. This was the moment. What I was about to say would make the entire table forget every single cruise photo they had just seen. And by the time I was done, they wouldn't just be shocked, they'd realize that while they were busy spending my emergency fund, I was buying something that controlled their future. I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough for every pair of eyes to lock on me. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't waver. I wanted them to feel the control shift in real time. "I know you've all been curious about what I've been up to," I began, smiling faintly. "And since some of you thought my emergency fund was better spent on vacation cocktails, I figured you deserved to know how I've been spending my time instead." I reached into my purse and pulled out a sleek black folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one bold heading, "Property. Date." I placed it on the table and slid it toward Aunt Cheryl. She frowned, picking it up. Her eyes scanned the page, and then she froze. This is for the Harper Street building." Her voice trembled, and I could see Madison leaning over to read it too. "That's right," I said evenly. "The same building you've been trying to buy for years. I closed on it 2 months ago." The table erupted with murmurs. My uncle asked, "How?" "I thought you were," but I cut him off, my tone still calm. "Broke? Struggling? Barely scraping by? That's what you were supposed to think. While you were laughing at my job and calling me the charity case of the family, I was building a business. And last quarter alone, it made more than all of you combined." Aunt Cheryl's face went pale. Madison's mouth hung open. "So, you own it now?" she asked weakly. "I do. Which means if anyone wants to lease space in it, they'll have to go through me." I let that sink in for a beat, then added, "Funny thing, your boutique idea? I've already rented that prime corner spot to another tenant." The silence that followed was electric. No one touched their dessert. A few cousins glanced away, clearly embarrassed. I leaned back in my chair, my smile polite but sharp. "See, the difference between us is, you spent my money on a 1-week vacation. I spent my money building something that will last a lifetime. And just when I thought they'd had enough shock for one night." I reached into my purse again. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, pulling out an envelope. "This contains the guest list for an event I'm hosting next month. It's in my building. You're all welcome to come, if you can handle seeing what real success looks like." The look on Aunt Cheryl's face told me she knew this was only the beginning. The dinner ended in a strange, tense quiet. People left the table in small groups, whispering among themselves, glancing back at me like they weren't sure whether to be impressed, embarrassed, or furious. Aunt Cheryl avoided eye contact entirely, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she fumbled for her coat. Madison didn't say a single word on the way out, which was a miracle considering she usually had a comment about everything. When I stepped outside into the crisp night air, I could feel the shift. For years, I had been the quiet one in the family, the one they overlooked, underestimated, and talked down to. Tonight, I'd flipped the script. And the best part? I hadn't needed to yell, beg, or fight for my dignity. I'd let the truth, and the success they never saw coming, speak for itself. The following week, the calls started. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to catch up. A distant uncle wanted to grab coffee, to talk about business opportunities. Even Aunt Cheryl, who had been avoiding me like the plague, sent me a text, "Hey Scarlett, about the boutique, maybe we could work something out?" I didn't reply. Some people don't deserve a seat at your table after they've stolen from your plate. Instead, I focused on my event. I poured my energy into making it unforgettable, a grand opening for my building's new tenants, complete with live music, catered food, and press coverage. I sent out formal invitations to every single family member, knowing full well most of them would show up just to snoop, and they did. On the night of the event, I stood at the entrance in a deep emerald dress, greeting guests as cameras flashed. The same relatives who once mocked me now walked through my doors, their eyes darting around in awe at the marble floors, polished fixtures, and bustling crowd. When Aunt Cheryl arrived, she lingered at the edge of the room, trying to act unimpressed. But I caught her staring at the prime corner space, the one she had dreamed of for years, that now housed a thriving boutique run by someone else. The owner, a confident woman in her 30s, waved at me from behind the counter. I walked over to Aunt Cheryl, smiling politely. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I said. "You know, this spot gets more foot traffic than any other in the building. Great for business." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's nice," she muttered. I leaned in slightly. "Here's the thing, Aunt Cheryl, vacations fade. The photos get old. But ownership? That stays. I hope you enjoyed that cruise, because while you were on that ship, I was building this." Her silence was answer enough. As the night went on, people toasted to my success, shaking my hand, congratulating me. And while part of me wanted to relish the satisfaction of proving them wrong, a bigger part of me felt free. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their validation. I had built something with my own two hands, and no one could take that from me. By the time the event ended, the family dynamic had shifted for good. They still whispered, still gossiped, but the tone had changed. I wasn't the struggling cousin anymore. I wasn't the easy target. I was the one holding the keys, not just to the building, but to my own future, and the next time they thought about using me, they'd remember this night, and think twice.